I stood at the service entrance of Harrison Manor, my hand hovering over the brass doorknob I'd turned thousands of times before. The kitchen door, the proper entrance for the help, as my stepmother Caroline never failed to remind me. 10 years of being forced to use this entrance, even after my father's death, made me a legal heir. Snow fell softly around me, catching in my designer coat that cost more than Caroline's monthly spa budget. Not that she'd recognize it. The label was too exclusive for her nouveau rich tastes. My phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Peters, my real estate attorney. Papers ready, waiting for your signal. I smiled, tucking the phone back into my purse. Inside, I could hear the familiar sounds of the annual Harrison Christmas dinner. Crystal clinking, forced laughter, the constant competition of who had acquired what, who had traveled where. Miss Alexandra? Maria, our old housekeeper, opened the door. Her eyes brightened seeing me, then filled with concern. "Oh, honey, you shouldn't be using this entrance anymore." "You're the help?" I finished with a wink. "Just playing my part one last time, Maria. Trust me." She hugged me quickly, whispering, "They're awful today. Miss Caroline has been bragging about renovating your mother's rose garden into a tennis court." My mother's roses? The last piece of her left in this house, besides me. Of course, Caroline would choose today to announce their destruction. The kitchen was warm and fragrant with real cooking. Maria's domain, not the catered nonsense Caroline served in the dining room. Other household staff moved about, preparing dishes while shooting me sympathetic glances. They knew who really took care of them after Father died, who ensured their pensions remained intact when Caroline tried to slash them. "Alexandra," Caroline's shrill voice carried from the dining room, "if you're skulking in the kitchen again, do make yourself useful and bring more wine." Stifled laughter followed her command. My step-siblings, no doubt, Thomas and Victoria, who'd never worked a day in their lives, but loved to mock my servant tendencies. I picked up an expensive bottle of Bordeaux, one I'd actually purchased, though Caroline had undoubtedly taken credit for it. "Time to serve the Last Supper," I murmured to Maria, who covered her knowing smile. The dining room was a monument to Caroline's tacky idea of luxury. Everything gold-plated and ostentatious. Nothing like the elegant simplicity my mother had cultivated. My step-siblings lounged in their usual spots near the head of the table, while various social climbing friends filled the other seats. "Oh good, the wine girl arrives," Thomas smirked. At 35, he still lived off his monthly allowance, spending his days networking at country clubs. Victoria adjusted her obviously new diamond necklace so it caught the light. "Really, Alexandra, if you love serving so much, we should put you on staff officially. Though we have to discuss a proper uniform." I poured the wine silently, years of practice keeping my hand steady despite their jabs. Caroline sat at the head of the table, my father's place, then my mother's, now claimed by a woman who saw the house as nothing but a status symbol. "Since you insist on joining us for Christmas," Caroline gestured to a small table near the kitchen door, "you can sit there. We wouldn't want to make the real guests uncomfortable." More snickers. The real guests, social climbers, and fair-weather friends who'd disappear the moment the money ran dry. Which, if they'd bothered to check the estate accounts, was happening faster than they realized. I took my seat at the servants' table, carefully arranging my simple black dress. The channel label hidden inside would have paid for everyone's meal tonight. "Now then," Caroline raised her glass, "I have an exciting announcement. As you know, this estate has been in need of modernization. So I've decided to begin extensive renovations in the new year, starting with that dreadful rose garden. My phone felt heavy in my pocket. One text would set everything in motion. The tennis court will be regulation size, she continued, and the pool house will be converted into a spa retreat. Of course, some staff quarters might need to be downsized. Maria, bringing in another dish, barely concealed her distress. Those quarters were her home for 30 years. Oh, and Alexandra. Caroline turned her cold smile to me. Since you love the kitchen so much, you should know we're converting the service wing into a wine cellar. You'll need to find new accommodation by February. That was it, the final twist of the knife. I pulled out my phone, keeping it visible on the small table. Actually, Caroline, I said clearly, we need to discuss some changes to those renovation plans. She laughed. Dear girl, I don't discuss property decisions with the help. My phone rang right on schedule. I put it on speaker. Miss Harrison? Mr. Peters' voice filled the room. The papers are signed and registered. Congratulations. You now own the entire estate, including all adjacent properties and holdings. The crystal glass slipped from Caroline's hand, shattering against the imported tablecloth. What did he say? Victoria whispered. I stood up slowly, smoothing my dress. I believe he said I own everything, including the chair you're sitting in, Caroline, and I think it's time for some renovations of my own. The dining room froze in perfect tableau. Caroline's face locked in disbelief, Victoria clutching her fake diamonds, and Thomas half rising from his chair with his mouth hanging open. This is impossible, Caroline finally sputtered. The estate is in my name. Your father left. Left everything in trust, I interrupted smoothly. A trust that matured last month on my 30th birthday. But you knew that, didn't you? That's why you've been rushing to spend as much as possible before losing control. I walked slowly around the table, touching the back of each chair. What you didn't know was that I spent the last 5 years buying every property surrounding the estate. The lands you thought were owned by various holding companies. All mine. But you work in that little office downtown, Victoria protested weakly. I smiled. That little office is the headquarters of Harrison Global Investments. We manage over $12 billion in assets. Though I'm not surprised you never bothered to check, too busy spending money to wonder where it came from. Mr. Peters cleared his throat over the speakerphone. Should I proceed with the other arrangements, Ms. Harrison? Yes, please. Send in the security team. On cue, professionally dressed security personnel entered the dining room. Maria appeared in the doorway, beaming as she watched the scene unfold. This is outrageous. Caroline stood up, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I'll call the police. About what? I asked calmly. Your illegal accessing of trust funds. The forged documents you used to claim ownership of my mother's personal items. Or perhaps the offshore accounts where you've been hiding stepmother. She went pale. How did you? I learned from you, Caroline. I watched everything. Every scheme, every manipulation, every cruel little power play. I just watched from the kitchen, where you thought I belonged. Thomas jumped up. You can't just throw us out. We live here. Actually, I can. You see, I had my lawyers review every document you've signed in the past decade. Apparently, living rent-free in a trust property requires proper documentation. Documentation you never filed. Victoria burst into tears, smearing her expensive mascara. But where will we go? Don't worry, I said, taking my father's seat at the head of the table. I'm not completely heartless. You have until New Year's to find new accommodation. More generous than the 2 weeks' notice you gave Mrs. Reynolds when you kicked her out of the gardener's cottage to build your yoga studio. The security team began quietly escorting the dinner guests out. Caroline's social circle couldn't leave fast enough. Their previous sycophantic smiles replaced with barely concealed glee at her downfall. "Maria," I called out, "please show Mr. Peters' team which items belong to the estate. They'll be cataloging everything tonight." "With pleasure, Miss Alexandra," Maria replied, already directing staff to unlock various rooms. Caroline made one last attempt. "Your father would be ashamed of you, treating family this way." The room went silent. I stood slowly, letting my simple black dress catch the light just right to reveal its true quality. "Family," I said softly. "Let's talk about family, Caroline. When father was dying, who sat with him every night? When the estate needed managing, who learned every aspect of the business while you were redecorating? Who kept the staff employed when you wanted to fire everyone to save money for your spa trips?" I pulled out a small key, the key to my mother's private study, which Caroline had never managed to open. I am my father's daughter, and more importantly, I am my mother's daughter. This estate isn't just property to me, it's a legacy, one you never understood. My phone buzzed again, another message from Mr. Peters. "Trust transfer complete. All accounts now under your control. Check your credit cards," I suggested to my step-siblings. "I think you'll find they've been deactivated. Don't worry about the charges you made this morning. Consider them my Christmas gifts to you." Victoria crumpled into her chair. Thomas started frantically tapping on his phone, presumably discovering his accounts were frozen. "You can't do this," Caroline whispered, but her voice had lost its authority. "I already have." I nodded to the security team. "Please escort them to their rooms. They can pack personal belongings only, authenticated personal belongings." As they were led away, I heard Victoria wail, "But where will we have Christmas dinner next year?" I looked around the dining room, at my mother's portrait that Caroline had relegated to a dark corner, at the tacky decorations that would soon be replaced, at the kitchen door that would never again be used to segregate family from help. "I'm sure there's a nice restaurant that would be happy to serve you," I called after them. "Just make sure you can afford the bill." As the grandfather clock struck midnight, I sat in my mother's study, finally alone. The security team had finished their initial inventory. Maria had overseen the removal of Caroline's more garish decorations, and my step-family had been confined to their rooms under supervision while they packed. My phone buzzed with a message from Victoria. "Please, we can work something out. That necklace you always loved. It's yours." I smiled, remembering the fake diamonds she'd been so proud of. "You mean the cubic zirconia?" I texted back. "Keep it. Consider it a memento." The study remained exactly as my mother had left it, protected by a lock system Caroline never managed to crack. Every book, every photograph, every small treasure exactly where it should be, including the item I'd come to find. The bottom drawer of Mother's desk contained a simple wooden box. Inside was a letter, dated just before her death, and a single key. "My dearest Alexandra," the letter began, "if you're reading this, you've finally taken back what's yours. The key opens the vault in the wine cellar, the real vault, not the decoy Caroline thinks she found. Everything I couldn't trust to lawyers is there. Use it wisely." A knock at the study door interrupted my reading. "Miss Alexandra?" Maria called softly. "They're asking to speak with you, all three of them." I tucked the letter away. In the main hall, please. It's time they learned the difference between living in a house and being part of its legacy. The main hall, with its sweeping staircase and generations of Harrison family portraits, had always been Caroline's favorite spot for making grand pronouncements. Now she stood there like a deflated version of herself, designer outfit wrinkled, makeup smeared. "Alexandra," she began, forcing a maternal tone she'd never actually used before, "surely we can discuss this reasonably. We're still family." "Stop." I held up my hand. "You lost the right to that word the day you made me eat Christmas dinner in the kitchen after my father's funeral. I was 16, grieving, and you were already redecorating his study." Thomas stepped forward. "Look, we know we've been difficult. But this house, I cut in, was built by my great-grandfather. Every brick, every beam, every rose in that garden you wanted to destroy has a story. Stories you never bothered to learn because you were too busy treating it like a trophy." Victoria dabbed at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief, one she'd stolen from my mother's collection. "What do you want? Money? Position? Name it?" I laughed softly. "I have more money than you can imagine. As for position," I gestured to the security team, "I'd say my position is quite clear." "Then why?" Caroline demanded. "Why go through all this deception? Why work in that office, live in that apartment, if you were so wealthy?" "Because," I said, climbing the first few steps of the grand staircase to look down at them, "I wanted to see who you really were, without the fake smiles and forced politeness you showed when you thought I had power. I wanted to know if any of you had a shred of real family feeling left." The silence that followed was damning. "Your cars will be here in 10 minutes, I continued. "The Four Seasons has rooms reserved for you for 1 week. After that, you're on your own." "But our clothes? Our jewelry?" Victoria started. "Everything purchased with estate money stays here. Your trust fund payments have been discontinued, effective immediately. Mr. Peters has prepared detailed documentation of fund misuse over the past decade, should you wish to contest this legally." Caroline's face hardened. "Your father would be proud," I finished. "He left letters too, Caroline. In that vault you'd never found. He knew exactly who you were. He just hoped you'd prove him wrong." The front doors opened, revealing 3 black cars waiting in the circular drive. Snow was falling again, covering the garden where, come spring, my mother's roses would bloom again. "Miss Alexandra?" Maria appeared with a stack of papers. "The initial inventory is complete. We found some concerning items in Miss Victoria's safe." "My personal safe?" Victoria shrieked. "You had no right." "Actually," I held up a document. "According to the trust agreement, everything in this house belongs to the estate, including some rather interesting jewelry that matches the description of pieces reported stolen from the governor's wife last spring." Thomas went pale. Victoria stopped crying. Caroline gripped the banister for support. "Don't worry," I said quietly. "I'm not pressing charges. Consider it your Christmas gift, along with the chance to leave here with some dignity intact. Though I suggest you all find good lawyers." The security team began escorting them out. At the door, Caroline turned back one last time. "You planned this for years, didn't you? Watched us, studied us, just waiting for the right moment?" I thought of all the holidays spent in the kitchen, listening to their laughter. All the nights spent learning the business while they partied. All the quiet moments in this study, reading my mother's letters, preparing for this day. "No, Caroline, You planned this. Every time you chose cruelty over kindness. Every time you put status above family. Every time you looked at me and saw someone to dominate instead of someone to love. I just made sure you reaped what you sowed. The doors closed behind them with a final, heavy thud. Through the windows, I watched the cars disappear down the snow-covered drive. "Maria," I called out, "gather the staff in the kitchen, please. All of them. It's time for Christmas dinner. The real Christmas dinner." As I walked toward the kitchen, this time through the main hall, head held high, I smiled at my mother's portrait. "Merry Christmas, Mom," I whispered. "The roses are safe now. Everything is."